Welcome to this episode of Marriage for Better for Worse. Hi, I'm Pastor Bob Moeller, and for the next half hour or so, we're going to look at marriage, single, and relationship problems from a biblical perspective. I'm not a professional counselor or therapist or licensed whatever. I am a pastor who believes that listening, caring, prayer, and God's Word can resolve relationship issues. Let me encourage you, if you would like to see this program again, or one that we have done in the past, you can now access those at YouTube. Simply go to youtube.com and type in the browser Marriage TV, all one word, Marriage TV. And then when that comes up, click on videos. And it should populate, the page should fill with all the programs that we have done to date. And it covers a wide variety of subjects that you might be interested in watching yourself or passing on to someone that you think it could benefit. Let me encourage you to do that. Our topic for this program is, when is it time to separate? When is it time to separate? When in a marriage relationship is it time that the two of you temporarily move out? Someone leaves, you separate until your issues can be resolved. One of the most difficult and agonizing decisions a spouse can ever make is, when is it time to separate from my husband or wife? Notice, I did not say, and can I underscore this? I did not say, when is it time to divorce my husband or wife? But rather, when will it do our marriage more good for us to live apart for a season than to live together for the time being? There are times where more can be accomplished in terms of reconciling or strengthening a marriage by living apart than by living together. We call that a separation. Let me add some clarifying qualifications before I go further, because this is such a serious topic. I am always in favor of reconciliation wherever possible. Always in favor of reconciliation wherever possible. And granted, there are a limited number of situations where that may not be wise or possible. I recognize there are situations where it may not be wise or possible. And we'll speak about those a little bit later. But I am in favor of reconciliation based on a genuine and mutual taking of responsibility for past wrongs, showing remorse for what we've done that we should not have done, engaging in repentance, adopting a change of heart where we will not do the hurtful or wrong things again, making restitution, that is, trying to make things right where we made them wrong, and to rebuild trust, rather than seeking a divorce. I believe reconciliation is a much, much better option than seeking a divorce. Through God's amazing grace and the life-changing power of the gospel, every marriage potentially could be saved and restored. Notice I say potentially. Not everyone will be. There are circumstances, again, where it may be all but impossible given the gravity of what has occurred. But the power of the gospel to do miracles should not be underestimated. Furthermore, separation must never be used as a trial divorce, or it will sabotage its purpose from the very beginning and its potential to save the marriage. If you agree to a separation because you want to see what it would like to be divorced, that separation isn't going to work for you. It's not going to accomplish what it could, because your goals in this case are wrong. When is it the best time, in the best interest of everyone involved, to seek a separation? That's really the focus of this program. Let's start with one of the most obvious, which is when your spouse is engaging in an unrepentant adultery. In other words, they have no real serious interest in repenting and forsaking the adultery. They want to continue. They're enjoying it. They are in bondage to it, whatever it may be. And this is whether it's an emotional or physical affair. In that case, a separation, I believe, is the best option. Number two is when one spouse is inflicting physical or sexual or other serious abuse on their mate. Other types of abuse may include serious verbal, emotional, even spiritual abuse. So when physical or sexual abuse or serious other forms are occurring and it will not stop, and there's been warnings and there's been attempts at intervention, then there needs to be a separation. You simply cannot insist that someone leave themselves in a situation where they're being physically or deeply emotionally harmed. The next would be when your spouse is physically or sexually abusing or grossly neglecting the welfare of your children. When the children are being harmed, that is pretty much a no-brainer. That is going to call for separation. It likely will require and should involve reporting the situation to Child Protective Services in your state. When children are being harmed of this nature, the state has a compelling interest to intervene, and in that case, they must be taken out of the situation to a safe place where they cannot be further harmed, and that will require a separation. The next is when the level of emotional injury one or both are inflicting the other person is seriously affecting the physical, mental, spiritual well-being. In other words, the level of emotional injury, pain, if you will, that you're inflicting has reached the point where it's just intolerable, and you are suffering physically. Your health is deteriorating, if not collapsing. Mentally, you're near the point of a breakdown. Spiritually, your faith is being tested to the limit, and you may be at the point of a shipwreck. Well, rather than allow that to happen, a separation would be in order. Another reason a separation could be called for involves a spouse who's caught up in a serious addiction, whether it be pornography, alcohol, drugs, gambling, spending, or other forms of addictive behavior. You can only, tolerate, live with, absorb so much of the consequences of a spouse who has an addiction before it can bring you to the point of lasting ruin. Now, there are wonderful groups for spouses of those who are married to a person with addiction, such as Al-Anon and others, Celebrate Recovery. And indeed, you should seek out that first and see if they can help you discover coping mechanisms and how to draw boundaries and other things which may allow you to live with this person. But if it's to the point where it simply you cannot abide with it any longer, a separation may be necessary. Remember, I am not talking divorce, I am talking separation. Well, a few others. A serious breach of trust may be grounds for a separation. That includes a person carrying on a secret or an open relationship with a member of an opposite sex by texting, social media, which raises questions of possible emotional infidelity. In other words, let's say they're not actually having sex with one another, but you're discovering notes that are very intimate, romantic, torrid. That simply can't go on. That destroys your trust. A separation may be necessary. Or let's say your spouse has run up significant debt and has hidden that from you. It's a situation I've encountered many times with people. And so it can be $80,000, it can be more, $100,000, and you are on the hook with them for all that money, and they never told you about it. It doesn't require, but it may involve a separation till that gets sorted out. Someone who enters into a binding contract or obligation without your knowledge or consent. See, these are all acts where your trust has been destroyed. Finally, withholding or denying regular sexual intimacy in a marriage without a compelling biblical or rational justification, where you simply will not grant your spouse the the sexual satisfaction, the sexual availability that's supposed to be there in marriage according to 1 Corinthians, that may require a separation to sort that out. Or you discover your spouse has a strong attraction to someone of the same gender, and they are pursuing that attraction whether online or in person. They're attracted to someone of their own gender rather than yours, and you find out they're not just struggling with that, they're actually yielding and pursuing that. That can be another reason for a separation. A separation, in conclusion, needs to have a purpose. There needs to be a clear, defined purpose, and you need a counselor, a pastor, or someone to help you draw this up or agree to it. There needs to be a purpose, and the ultimate purpose needs to be reconciliation. The ultimate end of this separation is that you come back together, but in the intervening time, you've had the space and breathing room and rest from conflict you might have needed in order to resolve things. There needs to be a plan. How long is this going to go on? How often are we going to meet to resolve our differences? How are we going to explain this to the children and to our relatives? What will be the rules that we will both abide by with this separation? And finally, there needs to be a person, as I mentioned, overseeing the process, who is trying to facilitate as a neutral third party the eventual reconciliation. Philemon 1:15 was not talking about marriage, but it was talking about a relationship where a separation had occurred. A servant had run away from his master. His name was Onesimus, and he had run away from a man named Philemon. And Onesimus becomes a believer and realizes that what he did was wrong. And Paul writes a letter on his behalf to try and reconcile the two. But his point he makes, I think, applies to marriage as well. Perhaps the reason Onesimus, was separated from you for a little while was that you might have him back for good. I love that. I think that's the best mission statement of a separation I can think of. You are separated for a little while so that you might have each other back for good. That's the whole purpose of that. And on occasions, I have recommended that and helped facilitate it. And I'm glad to say there have been situations where marriages have been healed and in a lasting way, where a decade later or more, they're still doing well. Well, let's get to some questions about when is it time to separate. And again, I form these questions based on experiences, situations I've encountered in our ministry, or as a pastor that I've read about, others have told me. They come from a wide variety of sources, but putting it as a question, I believe, helps clarify the issue and the answer. My husband has been working at a bar at a restaurant for several years now. He often comes home in the middle of the night once the bar is closed. And for a few times, more frequently lately, he does not come home at all. Recently, during an argument, he stomped his foot down on my foot, nearly crushing my big toe. He said it was an accident and apologized, but I felt it was deliberate. I asked my sister what I should do, if I should ask him to leave and separate from him, but she said that would be the final straw for him and he would probably divorce me. So don't take the risk. What do you think? Well, I don't agree with your sister's advice. Proverbs says the fear of man is a snare. It's a trap. But whoever trusts in the Lord will be kept safe. And in this case, I apply that to mean he physically assaulted you. I would tend to believe that in his anger, he meant when he stomped his foot to hurt you. That has to stop. That's only going to escalate. It's only going to get worse. And I believe in zero tolerance when it comes to physical abuse of that nature. Probably you should have called the police, but short of that, you need to ask him to move out, even if that leads to his divorce, him divorcing you. You need to tell him to move out because your physical well-being, maybe your life, is on the line here, or at least some serious injury. And that is not worth trying to appease him and keep him in the house and to avoid a divorce. Living with a man who is threatening you and abusing you in such a nature is far worse than going through a divorce. As much as I hate divorce, as much as Scripture hates divorce, it does not hate divorced people. God does not hate divorced people, and sometimes it's sadly necessary. But I don't think you should go to a divorce first. Look at the option of a separation. That sometimes can bring the point home, be a true wake-up call. My husband and I are thinking of separating because of the escalating anger and fighting going on in our home. The problem is we have 4 children, all under the age of 7. Will a separation cause them the same degree of emotional trauma that a divorce would? I don't want them to suffer as I did when my parents broke up. Well, it all depends on how you approach your children and how they understand what's happening. If they think, because there's no explanation, but dad just moves out, or you do, and there's no explanation truly given to them, they can believe that their home is permanently breaking up, that this is a divorce, and it will be traumatic to them. It will leave scars. However, if you sit down with them, and actually I've helped facilitate these discussions with couples before with their children. I've actually gone to the home and sat down with the couple and the young kids and said, you know, mommy and daddy are fighting. You don't like that, do you? And the kids all nod their heads, no, we don't like it. And I imagine that scares you sometimes, doesn't it, when they fight? And they all nod their head. Well, what if mommy and daddy could learn not to fight? What if they could learn to get along with each other? Would you like that? Again, all the heads nod. You may even see a smile or two. Well, we have a plan to help mom and dad learn how to get along and quit fighting. But part of the plan is that dad will move out so that the fighting stops, so that you don't have to hear it every day and they don't have to either. During that time, they're going to be working with me or someone on how to get along with each other and even have fun. Would you like that? And again, heads nod. Well, would you be willing to trust me that this is only what we call a separation? This is not a divorce. And it will end. And I will tell you what progress they are making toward resolving and until the time they can come back again. So you don't have to be worried about what's going on and when it's going to be resolved. Well, if you go to that length with a group of children, most of the time they'll buy into it, particularly if you're telling the truth and everyone is being honest. So children don't have to be traumatized by something like a separation if you go to the length to listen to their fears, offer them assurances, give them explanations, and stay in touch with them. I have a Bible question. Can a pastor who separates from his wife still be allowed to serve in his current position at the church? Or should he be asked to step aside until his marriage issues are resolved? Is allowing him to remain in his position a violation of 1 Timothy chapter 3 and the qualifications of an elder, that he must first manage his own household well? Well, this is not a question that I can answer definitively, always yes or always no. To a great degree, it depends on the circumstances. It may be that the pastor simply cannot cope with his current responsibilities and duties while trying to address his deteriorating marriage, in which case I think the church should give him a paid sabbatical and should even offer to help pay for counseling and help restore that individual. I don't think he should be penalized. I don't think that he should be docked vacation pay. The church should help facilitate the reconciliation. If, however, let's say his spouse is unwilling to enter into counseling and is unwilling to pursue reconciliation and is bent on a divorce or perhaps is involved with someone else, I don't believe he should be punished by having him removed from his position, whether temporarily or for good. I think there should be some very clear guidelines established. I actually, as a young man growing up, lived through a situation similar to this in one of the churches I attended. There needs to be guidelines. There needs to be agreement that during this separation, he will not date other people. He will not be pursuing someone else. That he will be working as hard as he can to restore the marriage with his wife's cooperation, whatever that may be, and that he will have, accountability. He will have to meet weekly or thereabouts with people where he can answer questions about his ministry, his personal life, and what's going on. But it may be possible, and this will require an explanation likely to the members of the church, the status of his marriage, the strategy to try and reconcile it, the guidelines that are in place. I think if you explain all that to people, most are gracious enough, most are understanding and compassionate enough to allow him to continue without penalizing him, particularly if he is not the primary offending party in this case. I don't consider that a violation of 1 Timothy 3, in that we cannot control what our spouse does or what our children may do at the end of the day. We can try, but ultimately, I'm talking about their behavior. We can set limits and we can do our best. I'm talking about children who become adults. We can control minors, but adult children, no. I caught my husband viewing pornography on his cell phone. It turns out he's been viewing it for several months now, at least that's what he'll admit to. Should I ask him to move out and separate based on the grounds that pornography is a form of visual adultery? Again, it depends on his attitude. If he is repentant, if he is willing to seek help, if he is sincere in reaching out and allowing you and others to know the full extent of what he has done and where he is now. In other words, if he is looking for an ally rather than an adversary, I don't think that I would ask him to move out. It is obviously a case-by-case basis. If, however, he defends or minimizes or justifies his pornography habit, if he appears to be in bondage to it and shows all the classic signs of an addict, well, you may very well then need to do that, and you would be justified in doing so. When we were visiting relatives, one of my nieces did something at the dinner table to upset her father. He screamed at her at the top of his voice. Then he just laughed and went back to eating. She looked around at the rest of us with a nervous smile on her face, yet you could see she was clearly hurt by what he had done. This was not a one-time incident. He verbally abuses and screams at his wife and his other two boys. Is it time our sisters separate until he can get help for his obvious emotional and behavioral problems? What will happen to our nieces and nephews' emotional well-being if he's allowed to stay? Well, I think that's a self-evident question. That if he's allowed to continue that, it's going to leave permanent, lasting, destructive scars on the souls of his children and his wife, probably setting them up to either marry someone like himself or to repeat that same sin once they are in a relationship. Again, I'm not an advocate for a divorce, but unless he's willing to admit to his problem and more or less agree to a cease and desist order, you probably need to separate or ask him to leave, because this is doing damage that simply cannot be justified. Recently, my friend at work confided that he discovered his wife had run up nearly $80,000 in credit card debt without his knowledge. He's angry, feels betrayed, and is brokenhearted by her. His concern is that if he works their way out of it together, she might do the same thing over again. How can trust be restored, or is it too late for this marriage? Well, I've known situations where this has happened, and the mate who discovers this is simply unwilling to ever trust them again, and separates and even divorces. I don't think that's the wisest course. I'm not sure that's the biblical course. I think instead a separation would certainly be justified, and that you would need to consult a counselor, financial planner, a life coach, someone who would bring transparency and accountability into your money so that everyone knew where every dime was being spent and how. Again, this is a case-by-case basis. But if the person doesn't really see that what they did was serious or wrong, blames you, shifts blame elsewhere, and that's probably an indication they will do it again or continue that way. And then you do have a choice to make, and a separation may be necessary in order to get his attention. Well, I have a relative who's in a third marriage. Recently, we learned that her current husband will discipline her son from her second marriage, it's not his child, by pinning him to the floor and making him say, "You are the king of this house. You are the king of this house." This seems to us over the top and abusive. She knows it's wrong, but she's afraid her third marriage will fail if she says anything. Well, listen, she had that son before she had that husband, her third husband. And that is the only mother that boy has, is her. And if she does not stop this, if she does not demand he quit, if she does not protect him, pray tell me who is going to. You cannot sacrifice the well-being of your children for the sake of preserving a relationship with a husband or wife if real serious wrongdoing, abuse, I'm talking serious, talking life-changing, life-threatening abuse is occurring. You simply can't make that trade-off. Well, thank you for joining us. We appreciate so much you being with us. Please consider buying our latest book, The 6 Hearts of Intimacy, available on all major online websites. You can purchase it there. Thank you again. We're honored that you'd be with us. And until next time, remember, marriage is for better, for worse, and for keeps.